This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha, the channel that's loved by men and conservative women across the globe. We're back at you this week with a great story, and you can see the title right on your screen. A Wild Girls Weekend results in 2 breakups and a divorce. I call that a triple play. Now let's get into this story. And here's the original post. She starts out and says, "I'm posting this as I did something I deeply regret and hope someone out there can offer me some advice that I can put to good use. I'm a 23-year-old female. I'll refer to myself as Kim. And my boyfriend, now ex-boyfriend, I'll call Troy, is 25. We had been dating for a total of 4 months, intimate for the past 2.5. He is the love of my life, but I'm afraid I've lost him forever." Well, let me stop you right there, OP. He's not the love of your life after 10 weeks. He may be the lust of your life at that time, but he's definitely not the love of your life. I'll now attempt to explain the current situation. Troy and I met through an active singles group that meets a couple times a month for group activities like hiking, rowing, and volleyball. From the first time I saw Troy, I fell in love with him. No, you didn't. You fell in lust with him. We talked briefly that day and from there started texting each other about upcoming group outings. Our initial conversations didn't go any further than that. I was persistent though, and eventually he asked me out. I was thrilled, but he took things really slow. At first I thought he just saw me as a friend, as he didn't make any moves at all. Looking back now, I think he was just testing me. In fact, at the end of the night on our first date, we just bumped fists. On our second date, we did a friend's hug, and by the third, he gave me a quick peck on the cheek. Well, I have to agree with her here. This guy is moving at a snail's pace if he was really interested in this girl. Finally, after 7 dates spread out over 6 weeks, we were intimate. It was a truly glorious experience, by far the most fulfilling I ever had. As I said, I fell in love with him at first sight. I quickly cut off other guys I was dating at the time, and for the past 10 weeks, we have spent every evening together. Our physical chemistry is excellent. I know a lot of this was due to it being new, but this was different. Our intimacy is different. I've told him countless times that I love him, but he has never said it back, though I know from his actions he loves me too. A girl can just tell. I think he wanted to remain mysterious and not jump into a commitment too quickly, and I respected that. So this brings me to what happened 2 weekends ago. This is when I sabotage my own well-being. My best friend, call her Kelly, and her sister, call her Megan, invited me to a girls' weekend at a lake cabin Kelly rented to celebrate Megan's 30th birthday. Along with Kelly and I, 2 of Megan's married friends from her neighborhood would be attending as well. I'll call them Eleanor and Janet. At first, I had no interest in going, as I didn't want to be away from Troy, but eventually decided to go. That Friday afternoon, I met Troy at his apartment and we spent quality time together before I left for the 90-minute drive to the cabin. Little did I know this would potentially be the last time we ever shared intimacy, so they got it on there before she left to drive to the cabin. That night, all of us ladies met up at the cabin at 7 and went out to dinner. We had a great time just talking and laughing all night. When we got back to the cabin, we were beat and just crashed. The following morning, we fixed a big breakfast, drank mimosas, and talked more. We then spent the afternoon at the pool laying in the sun. It was there we met a bunch of guys who happened to be renting a cabin 4 doors down from where we were staying. We all casually chatted throughout the afternoon, and we told them we were there to celebrate Megan's birthday. That night, we girls headed out to a different restaurant to celebrate Megan's birthday. Everything went well. However, Megan, Kelly, and I did get a little tipsy. When we got back, it was after midnight. While we were sitting around decompressing, there was a knock at the door. We were terrified, thinking, who could it be at that hour? Kelly looked out and said it was the pool guys, the guys they met that afternoon at the swimming pool. They had 2 bottles of champagne and a bunch of plastic champagne glasses. They said they came to wish Megan a happy birthday. Eleanor and Janet said not to let them in, but Kelly already did. Even though we were all tired from being in the sun all day and drinking all night, Megan, Kelly, and I accepted their offer. Big mistake, ladies, big mistake. Eleanor and Janet looked unsettled by this and went up to bed, so these 2 ladies weren't having it. Before doing so, Eleanor said these guys shouldn't be here. Megan told her it was okay. Looking back, I wish we would have listened to Eleanor. The 6 of us drank all the champagne. Now listen to this, guys. And eventually paired off with the guys in separate bedrooms. So they just met these dudes in the afternoon. Let's say maybe afternoon, 12, 1 o'clock. Now here it is 12 hours later, and they're taking them up to bed. Oh my goodness. When I woke up in the AM, the guy was still laying beside me. He looked like an ugly beast. Sickened, I walked down the hall to use the bathroom. On the way, I peeked in both Kelly and Megan's rooms and saw they both were sound asleep alongside the guys they spent the night with. I felt awful. Well, you should feel awful. I then noticed the doors to Eleanor's and Janet's rooms were open. When I looked inside, the beds were made. I then looked outside and saw their cars were gone. I then went into Megan's room and told her that her friends left. Hearing this, she sprang out of bed and went into panic mode. She called and texted both of them, but they didn't answer. She then started crying and woke up the guy beside her and told him he needed to leave. She then ran into Kelly's room, woke her up, and kicked Kelly's guy out as well. By this time, the guy I was with heard the commotion and came out into the hallway fully dressed. Megan told the guys last night was a big mistake, and they all needed to get the F out now. The guys had a WTF look on their faces and headed down the stairs. As we all started walking down the steps, there was a loud knock at the door, and a guy's voice was shouting to open up. Megan said, "Oh my God, it's my husband," and started crying. The guys looked fearful. Kelly directed them to the back door and let them out that way. Once outside, they took off running across the backyard. Megan's husband, who I'll call Richard, saw them and started yelling at them, walking towards the back of the cabin. Thankfully, he didn't pursue them. He then came in the back door and just started yelling. It was an ugly and scary situation. I've never seen anyone so angry. Richard called Megan the most vile names you can imagine. He eventually left the cabin, banging the door so hard that one of the deer trophies fell off the wall. Richard peeled out, sending gravel against the front windows. Thankfully, none of them broke. Megan then grabbed her keys and ran out the door to follow Richard. Kelly and I were left there alone, stunned at what just happened. It was obvious that Eleanor and Janet went right home and told Richard about what went on that night. We couldn't believe friends could betray another friend like that. OP, you're totally wrong there. These ladies, Eleanor and Janet, did the right thing. They saw that you guys were up to no good. They tried to get you to stop. You wouldn't stop, so they got out of there. They went home and immediately told their husbands, I'm sure, and their husbands, along with them, they probably decided, hey, let's go tell this Richard because it's the right thing to do. You would expect that if somebody was cheating on you, so I applaud these women for what they did. Kelly and I decided to stay for a few more hours to clean up the place so she wouldn't get charged the $300 cleaning fee. We, of course, talked about Megan's predicament and thought about what we were going to tell our boyfriends. So they were contemplating, oh boy, they're going to find out. How do we spin this? Kelly called Megan and eventually she answered. Megan was crying hysterically, so they didn't talk long. Kelly said Megan told her Richard locked her out of the house and told her he wanted a divorce. She was at her parents' house and was in the process of telling them, so she had to go. Kelly hung up the phone and just started crying. I knew she felt terrible, as renting the cabin was all her idea. Kelly and I left the cabin just before noon and headed back to town in our own cars. About 20 minutes into the drive, Kelly called me and frantically said her boyfriend called her and broke up with her right over the phone. He didn't want an explanation. He said he knew everything and that they were done. Apparently, Richard told him all about what had happened. Hearing this, I felt terrible for Kelly. She and her boyfriend lived together and were planning on getting married next year. While the whole situation with Kelly and Megan was awful, my main concern was Troy and what I would say to him if he found out. I knew if Kelly's boyfriend knew, then he probably already told Troy or would be telling him very soon, as they had become good friends. I then decided to just call Troy to feel him out, but he didn't answer. So I texted him and nothing. I drove over to his apartment, but he wasn't there. I expected the worst at that point, and I was right. Around 1 o'clock, Troy called me and asked how I was doing. I told him fine. He asked me if I was still at the cabin, and I told him no, we cut the trip short. He then asked if we had a good time. I hesitated to answer, then started rambling. Troy interrupted me and asked if I enjoyed the D I got last night. So he just came right out and sprung it on her. I was caught off guard and couldn't think of anything to say, so I just started apologizing and started crying, saying I was sorry. He interrupted me again and said not to apologize. He said I could do whatever I wanted. At first I thought he was sincere, but realized he was just being sarcastic. He just started laughing. I then asked him if we were through, and he said yes, of course. He said our girlfriend-boyfriend relationship was over as he isn't into non-monogamy. I said I wasn't either, and again with that, he just laughed at me. Well, what did you expect him to do? I realized what I said didn't make sense. Yeah, it didn't make sense. But he didn't have to be so cruel. He said we were back to being like we were before we started dating, just casual acquaintances. I told him I didn't want that. I wanted us. He again just laughed and told me to stop what I was sounding so ridiculous. I think she added the word what there. I think she meant to say because I was sounding so ridiculous. I then asked him if I would be seeing him that night like we planned, and he said no. He told me he'd be shipping the stuff I kept at his apartment back to me and to just toss out the stuff he had at my place as he didn't want it back. And that's it. He was done with me. This all happened exactly 2 weeks ago today, and I am broken. I've pleaded with him through text to give me another chance, but he's done. I miss him so much. I saw him out at the grocery store Monday evening and we spoke briefly. He treated me distantly. The extent of our conversation was he asked me how I was doing. I said terrible, and he told me things will get better and said he had to go. He seems to be totally unaffected by the whole thing and has moved on, while I'm a broken mess. Do you have any suggestions of what I could do to win him back? There's nothing you can do. Let me just tell you, there's nothing you can do. She says, I'm willing to do anything, including just being an FWB relationship for him. But I don't think he'd go for that. Well, of course he's not going to go for that because obviously this guy, again, is a high value man. He wants a good woman who is going to be in a monogamous relationship with him. You've already proved that you're not worthy of that. She says, I look forward to getting your replies. Thanks for reading this, Kim. So that's the end of her original post. And now for a few responses that she got back from the community. And in a few of these responses, she does respond back to the people that replied to her. So let's take a look at those. But before we do, I want to encourage you, if you're liking what you hear, hit that like button. That will make sure that this video gets seen by people all over this beautiful planet. Now, let's take a look at some of those responses. The first one's from a guy. He says, "Sorry, Kim, I don't have any sympathy for you. You say Troy is the love of your life, and yet you have I'm guessing unprotected, with a complete stranger, someone you described as a beast. Not only are you not relationship material, you are downright dangerous. Have you ever heard of little things called STIs?" She responds. She says, "Of course I'm concerned about STIs and got tested the following week. I'm all clear. I'd never put Troy's health in danger. Plus, I can assure you I will never do something like that again." This guy now responds back to her and he says, "If you got tested right after, you should wait a few weeks and get tested again. As I've heard, sometimes these pathogens do not show up on tests until weeks later." Next, here's a response from a woman. She says, "What you did was completely reckless. Let me get this straight. You meet a guy at a swimming pool in the afternoon and have a casual conversation. Then at midnight he comes over and you let him in, have a couple drinks, and then take him right up to bed? I don't want to be harsh, but you've got real problems and need to work on yourself. Have you seen a therapist about this?" She responds. She says, "I haven't yet, but I'm going to. It just seems when I drink, I become another person altogether, someone I don't recognize. Then, when I sober up, I realize what I've done and I'm full of regret. I know the simplest solution is to quit drinking, and I've already done that." Well, good for you, OP. That's your first step. "But I'm still going to see a therapist to help me find out why I get like that." You get like that because you want to have these relationships with these men. You use the alcohol as a bridge to get you there. And you also use it as an excuse, just like you're doing here. And we've got another response from a woman. She said, "What you did was careless. However, Troy sounds like he may be somewhat insecure and therefore may have a tendency to become controlling of the women he dates in order to deal with his insecurities." So here goes another one of these modern women calling a guy who has standards insecure and controlling. Have we heard that before? Are you sure this is someone you'd want to have a relationship with? I may be wrong, but I thought I'd bring this to your attention. She responds. She said, "Troy is not like that at all. He told me I can do what I want with my body, but he doesn't want to be in a relationship with me anymore. He just can't understand, or maybe just doesn't believe me when I tell him what I did was a mistake that I will never repeat. He just keeps telling me that it's too late for that, and I can't square that circle." Whatever that means. Well, what that means, OP, is that you're asking for the impossible. You did something and you want him just to totally discount what you did. This wasn't your first rodeo. In fact, I think all three of you women have done this before multiple times because you did it so easily with these guys. We got another response from a woman. She says, "Whatever happened to Megan and Kelly? How did things turn out for them? I hope all three of you girls were able to save your relationships, as I sincerely believe you've learned your lesson and will never do that again." She responds and she says, "Megan and her family are no longer speaking with Kelly and I. They blame Kelly for everything because it was her idea to rent the cabin. Last I heard, her husband had filed for divorce and they had put their house up for sale. From what I understand, Megan has never gone back to her home, as Eleanor and Janet have made sure everyone in that neighborhood knows their business." So again, they're throwing shade to this Eleanor and Janet, but Eleanor and Janet are really the heroes here. She continues on. She says, "As for Kelly, she's still living with her boyfriend, but they are no longer a couple. They are now just roommates, and he made her sign on to the remaining months of the lease to keep living there. She's now paying half the rent and utilities, where before she was just buying their groceries. So she's paying for half the rent and utilities, but if I was this guy, I would have just made her move out. She's still trying to get him back, but has made no progress. He's handling this just like Troy. No, he's not, because he's still living with his ex-girlfriend or ex-fiancée, whatever she was, and that's a big mistake. Number one, there's going to be animosity because of what she did. Why do you want to live in the same space with her? Number two, she could falsely accuse you of something. Number three, she's going to slowly try to reel you in, and she's probably going to be successful. So what he's doing here is a big, big mistake, even though it may sound good. Oh, now I got her sharing the space and she's paying half the rent and half the utilities. No, what you want to do in these situations with a breakup is you want to get her out of your life and move on. While she's still living there, you're never going to be able to move on. And we'll wrap it up with another reply from a guy. He says, I vote for Eleanor and Janet as Women of the Year. These ladies are obviously high value conservative women who still have morals and values. One day I hope to marry a woman like that. I don't know the complete history of Eleanor and Janet, but from what they did here, I think it was very noble. They did the right thing, and I applaud them for that. So now, let's cover the morals of this story. Number one, men need to have standards and stick to them. Don't listen to all this modern talk out there about guys who have standards are controlling or they're insecure. That's a bunch of BS. As a man, you need to have standards and you need to stick with them. Number two, these standards should be clearly known by your girlfriend, fiance, or wife. You should have red lines, meaning if they cross that, then there is going to be repercussions. If you go out and have a girls' night out and you do anything inappropriate, guess what? We're breaking up. That's a red line that you crossed and it's over. They need to understand those boundaries. Number three, girls only get-togethers and trips are nothing but trouble and should be a non-starter. Now if a couple women, hey, you want to go out to a pottery making class or they want to go out shopping together, nothing wrong with that. Okay, occasionally doing that kind of stuff. But going out to clubs, bars, going out to vacations, going to Las Vegas or places like that, no. Those are non-starters, and that definitely should be a red line that is never crossed. And then finally, and I have to remind everybody of this because sometimes we're all down on women and the modern women especially, but there are still a lot of good women out there, gentlemen. They're just getting harder and harder to find. Like I've said in some of my videos, I believe 1/3 of the women out there are high value, high quality, traditional conservative women that are relationship material. The problem is trying to find one in modern society is like trying to find a diamond in a coal mine. They're out there, but it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time to sift them out. So those are my thoughts on this story. And now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story and how these guys handled the situation? Have you ever been in a situation where your girl had a crazy girls' nights out or a girls' trip and it ruined your relationship or blew up your relationship? Tell us about it in the comments. Also, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel. And I will talk to you on the next one.